collegiate. The evening air carried a soft chill, the kind that hinted at the change of seasons. I held a paper bag in my hands, collegiate, filled with the things my son loved most. His favorite curry, warm bread fresh from the bakery, and a slice of the chocolate cake I knew he could never resist. Collegiate. It had been weeks since we had shared a quiet dinner together. Work had kept him busy, and though he assured me constantly that he was fine, collegiate, I could hear the fatigue in his voice whenever we spoke. Tonight, I wanted to do something special for him. A mother's heart always aches when her child is too busy to rest, collegiate, and mine had been aching for a while. I left home earlier than usual, a smile tugging at my lips as I imagined the look on his face when he saw me waiting. Collegiate. My son had always been a reserved man, not one for grand gestures, but his eyes always softened when I surprised him with small acts of care. Collegiate. Those moments made me feel like my efforts mattered, like even though he had grown into a man, he still needed me. I parked near his office building, collegiate, choosing a spot where I knew he usually left his car. The street was quiet, just the hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark of a dog in the neighborhood. Collegiate. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting streaks of gold and purple across the sky. I waited, fingers nervously smoothing the paper bag, excitement bubbling in my chest. Collegiate. Then I saw him, his familiar stride tall and confident, as he walked toward his car. My heart swelled at the sight. For a moment, everything felt worth it. Collegiate. The long years of sacrifice, the countless nights of worry, the silent prayers whispered when he was sick as a child. All of it came rushing back in that instant. Collegiate. He was my pride, my only treasure. I ducked slightly, hiding behind the steering wheel of my car. I wanted to surprise him at the perfect moment. Collegiate. Perhaps knock on his window and laugh when he looked startled. I wanted to see his tired eyes light up. Collegiate. Just like they did when he was little and I showed up at school events he thought I'd miss. But then, my smile froze. He reached his car, unlocked the door, and slid inside. Collegiate. Only he wasn't alone. At first, I thought nothing of it. Perhaps a colleague needed a ride, or maybe it was a friend. Collegiate. But then I saw her face illuminated under the streetlight, and my breath caught in my throat. It was her. The woman sitting beside my son was not a stranger. Collegiate. She was someone I knew too well, someone who had been in my home countless times, who had shared tea with me at the kitchen table. Collegiate. Who had laughed with me as though we were sisters. I froze, watching as they leaned closer. Her hand reached for his, and he did not pull away. Instead, collegiate, he clasped it tightly, his thumb brushing her knuckles in a gesture so tender, so intimate, that it felt like a dagger plunging into my chest. And then I saw it, the kiss. Collegiate. Soft, lingering, filled with the kind of affection a son should never hide from his mother. Except this was not affection I could accept. This was betrayal. Collegiate. My breath trembled as tears welled in my eyes. The bag of food in my lap suddenly felt heavy, useless. The curry, the bread, collegiate, the cake, all the love I had poured into preparing them, meant nothing in that moment. Nothing. I gripped the steering wheel to steady myself, collegiate, but my heart was racing too fast, pounding so loudly I thought it might burst. I wanted to storm out of the car, to scream, to demand answers, but I didn't. I couldn't, collegiate. Instead, I stayed hidden, watching as the two people I trusted most laughed together, as though the universe hadn't just shattered inside me. My son. My friend, collegiate. The two pillars of my life, crumbling into dust before my eyes. That night, sitting in the darkness of my car, I realized something with a clarity that shook me. Collegiate. My world was no longer the safe, loving place I had thought it was. Something inside me cracked wide open, and through the cracks poured the first embers of anger. Collegiate. I had come to give my son love, but what I found was betrayal. And deep within me, a voice whispered a truth I could not yet admit out loud. This was only the beginning. Collegiate. The night after I saw them together, I barely slept. My bed, once a place of comfort, felt like a battlefield where my thoughts waged war against each other. Collegiate. I turned from side to side, replaying the scene again and again. The way his hand wrapped around hers, the soft kiss they shared, the laughter that once belonged to me, collegiate, now stolen by her. My mind refused to quiet. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, my friend, my confidante, the woman I had trusted with my secrets, with my pain. Collegiate. Even with the stories of my struggles as a mother, I had invited her into my home, fed her with my own hands, called her my sister. And all this time, collegiate, she had been sitting at my table while secretly taking something far more precious. My son. Collegiate. How long had it been going on? How many times had she smiled at me while hiding this truth? And my son, how could he do this? I woke with swollen eyes. Collegiate. But I couldn't let him know. When I entered the kitchen that morning, I forced myself to act normal. He was already there, sipping coffee, scrolling on his phone. Collegiate. His hair was slightly tousled, and I noticed the faint trace of a smile on his lips. A smile that wasn't meant for me. "Good morning," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. He looked up briefly and nodded. Morning, Ma, that was it. No warmth, no questions about how I'd slept, nothing. Idiot. He used to ask those things once, but not anymore. Now, he sat there as though I were just another piece of furniture in the house. I wanted to slam my fists on the table, idiot, to ask him where he had been last night, who he had been with, why he had chosen to betray the woman who gave him life. But instead, idiot, I swallowed the lump in my throat and busied myself with washing dishes that were already clean. For days, I carried the secret in silence. I watched him carefully, idiot, pretending not to notice the excuses he made when he came home late, the quick texts he tried to hide from me, idiot, the faint traces of perfume that clung to his clothes, perfume that I recognized all too well. It was hers, idiot. Each discovery was like a shard of glass lodged deeper into my heart, and yet I stayed quiet, not because I was weak, idiot, but because I knew the truth had to be revealed at the right time. If I confronted him too soon, he would lie. If I confronted her, she would deny it with crocodile tears. Idiot, they would twist the story, paint me as paranoid, maybe even cruel. No, I had to be patient. In the meantime, idiot, I began to collect pieces of their betrayal like a careful hunter setting traps. I noticed when he left his phone on the table, and though I hated myself for it, idiot, I memorized the way he typed in his password. My heart pounded as I unlocked it one night, but what I found confirmed everything I feared: messages, photographs, idiot, night plans. I can't wait to see you again tomorrow. She doesn't suspect anything. You mean everything to me. Those words weren't meant for me, idiot. They were meant for her. The tears I held back as I read them nearly drowned me, but through them, something else began to grow. Anger, idiot. Not the wild kind that makes you reckless, but the slow, simmering kind that gives you strength. When I saw her at the market a few days later, idiot, she greeted me with the same fake smile she always wore. "Oh, you look tired," she said sweetly, resting her hand on my arm. "Is everything all right?" Her touch burned, idiot. Her voice cut deeper than any knife, but I smiled back, pretending not to know. "Yes, everything's fine," I said, though my heart whispered not for long, idiot. As I walked away, I realized something important. My silence was not weakness. It was strategy. I would wait. I would endure. I would let them think I was blind and naive, idiot. Because when the time came, when the truth could no longer be denied, my revenge would be far sweeter than any confrontation in a kitchen or a marketplace. For now, idiot, I let the betrayal eat away at me in silence. But in that silence, I was sharpening myself, like a blade waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Days turned into weeks, idiot, and with each passing moment, my silence became my greatest weapon. They thought I didn't know. They thought I was just the aging mother, idiot, too tired and too trusting to see the truth right in front of me. But I saw everything, every late night, every hushed phone call, idiot, every stolen glance when she visited and pretended to help me in the kitchen, while my son watched her from across the room with eyes that betrayed far too much, idiot. The pain had not lessened. No, it had only grown heavier, like stones piling onto my chest. But alongside the pain, something new began to take root, idiot. A kind of strength I had never felt before. A quiet, determined strength. I no longer asked my son questions about where he was going, idiot. I no longer reminded him to eat before leaving the house. I stopped waiting up for him at night. I became distant, watching, listening, remembering. And while they grew bolder, idiot, I grew wiser. I began to gather proof, not because I needed it to convince myself, but because I wanted the truth to be undeniable when I revealed it. Late one evening, idiot, while he was showering, I scrolled through his phone again. Screenshots, photographs, call logs. I kept them all, stored safely away where neither of them could reach, idiot. I even began writing down dates and times in a small notebook hid in my dresser, idiot. The betrayal was no longer just about love. It was about loyalty, about respect, about dignity. And then came the discovery that changed everything. Through his messages, idiot, I learned that my son wasn't only giving her his time and affection. He was giving her money, large amounts of it. I saw receipts, transfers, idiot. Even a credit card statement left carelessly in his drawer. He was financing her lifestyle, while I, the mother who raised him alone after his father died, was told we needed to cut down on expenses. But I didn't lash out. Not yet. Instead, I began to speak less and listen more, idiot. I reached out quietly to neighbors, to relatives, to people who had seen my son and her together. Some spoke hesitantly, others with pity in their voices, idiot. But the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Your son was at the cafe the other day with her. I thought it was strange, idiot. The way she laughed so close to him. They looked more than friends. Every word burned into me like fire, but I kept my expression calm, nodding, thanking them, idiot. Never letting my anger slip. At home, I allowed them to believe I was the same as always. She would still visit sometimes, her laughter echoing in my house like poison, idiot. She would still offer to help me cook, stirring my pots as though her hands weren't already stained with betrayal. My son would glance at her with that same softness, blind to the storm that was gathering just beneath my skin. I let them play their little game. I let them believe I was blind. Because a mother's patience, when tested, can be sharper than any blade. One evening, I stood before the mirror in my bedroom, staring at the woman who looked back at me. My face was older, lined with years of sacrifice and sorrow, but my eyes burned with something new, something fierce. "I will not be your fool," I whispered to my reflection. "I will not be discarded like I am nothing." The seeds of revenge had been planted deep within me, and they were already beginning to grow. I knew exactly what I had to do. The day would come when their lies would no longer be hidden in the shadows. The day would come when the house they had built on betrayal would crumble at my hands. But until then, I would smile. I would cook. I would sit across the table from them both and pretend I knew nothing. Because nothing terrifies a betrayer more than the silence of the one they've wronged. And in that silence, I was sharpening my revenge. The invitation went out with the carefulness of a woman who had learned how to plan storms. "It's just a small family dinner," I told everyone. "Nothing fancy, a chance to see each other." It sounded innocent enough, and that was the point. They accepted eagerly. Pride and secrecy make people hungry for any gathering where they can shine. My son agreed without hesitation. And she, of course, offered to bring dessert in that practiced voice she thought was honey. For weeks I had rehearsed the evening in my head. Not the shouting, not the humiliation. I wanted something far older and more devastating, quiet truth laid bare where everyone could see it. Revenge was not a scream to me anymore. It was a verdict. I wanted them to stand exposed under the light of the family I had built, with no shadow large enough to hide behind. The house glowed with the warmth of lamps and the scent of spices. My sister came early and hugged my shoulders with worry in her eyes. My nephew texted to say he'd be there. Old friends, a couple of neighbors, people who knew me, whose witness mattered. I set the table with dishes we had used for years, the china that belonged to my mother, and every plate felt like a promise that something old would be made new again. They arrived late, hand in hand, their laughter louder than it had any right to be. She smiled at me as if she were coming to a play where she was star and I the adoring audience. He, my son, looked as if he had been born certain of his own invulnerability. For a moment, I studied their faces calmly, the smooth, false confidence of youth, the careless arrogance of love unexamined. We ate, we shared memories. The room filled with the easy banter of family, the small jokes that stitch people together. It was exactly what I wanted. That ordinary evening that would make the extraordinary truth land with the force of a falling house. When the time came, I cleared my throat and asked everyone to join me in the living room. I had the photographs tucked in an envelope, the screenshots printed and placed in a neat packet beside a tea tray. People gathered, curious. My sister sat closest, hand gripping mine. My son's smile faded into a shadow I had not seen before. "I wanted us to be honest tonight," I began, and my voice was steady, unafraid. "There are things that happen in the quiet corners of houses. Things we tell ourselves won't matter. But secrets have the habit of spilling, and tonight, I will not be the one to keep them hidden." There was an awkward silence. She shifted in her seat. He attempted a laugh that sounded like it wanted to be brave. I placed the packet on the coffee table and opened it. Photographs, messages, bank transfers, receipts. Each piece of proof slid out like a stone pulled from a river, showing the bedrock beneath their smiling lives. Faces in the photos, dates stamped in the messages. A bank confirmation with a number that matched an evening's unexplained withdrawal. I let them speak for themselves. I did not have to cry or beg. The evidence did what my words could not. It removed doubt. My son turned pale, then red, then dull. He tried to reach for the packet, to snatch away the paper truths. But my sister's hand arrested him and then shook her head. "We saw these," someone murmured. Neighbors exchanged looks. The air that once held comfort tasted of salt and old grief. She began to speak, a practiced string of denials. "I didn't mean," she started. Her voice found a tone of hurt as if she were the victim. He faltered behind her, taut with embarrassment and anger. "You were invited into my house," I said, and there was a quiet like winter around my words. "You sat at my table. You held my son's hand in the shadows while you told me you loved me like a sister." But her eyes darted to the others. The neighbor who had seen them at the cafe clenched his jaw and nodded. My sister produced the screenshots I had passed to her and explained the transfers with the bluntness of someone who had spent nights thinking in arithmetic. Money leaving my son's account for restaurants, travel, gifts. A pattern emerged like a mapped constellation. each point leading inevitably to the truth. Idiot. My son tried to justify it with a shrug and a muttered, "Woo love each other." Such small words for the damage they had done. Love in his defense sounded like an excuse. Idiot. Love should have included honesty. It should have been strong enough to sit at the table and tell the mother of his heart the truth. Instead, idiot, they had chosen secrecy and theft, of money, of trust, of the quiet dignity of family. As the last photograph lay on the table, and the last message read aloud, idiot, the room grew heavy with things unsaid for a long time. People who had felt pity before looked now at two people they recognized and knew, a boy who thought himself clever, idiot, and a woman whose smile had been bought with gifts and paid for with lies. The neighbors' murmurs became a chorus of disappointment. My sister's eyes were wet and fierce. Idiot. My nephew, small and sharp, asked, "Why didn't you tell Ma?" And the directness stung my son to the bone. Idiot. She tried to leave, but there was nowhere to run when the world you had been hiding in was the very world that now witnessed your unmasking. People no longer smiled for her. Idiot. A few friends who had once welcomed her quietly distanced themselves. The shame she had so cleverly dodged began to catch up. I did not revel in the collapse. Idiot. Revenge had always been about restoration more than humiliation. My victory came not from watching them burn, but from clearing the air so the truth could let in light. Idiot. In that light, I saw what I had almost lost: my dignity, the respect of my family, and the chance to live without the constant ache of deception. Idiot. When the night ended and the guests had left, my son stood in the doorway. He looked years older in that single instant, not from time, but from comprehension. Idiot. "Ma," he said with a voice that was small, "I'm sorry. Sorry, I had learned, was a thin skin that could cover a wound but never heal the scar." I looked at him, idiot, and though my heart still held love, a mother's love has the strange durability of stone. I felt the toughening of something inside me. Forgiveness, if it came, idiot, would not be easy. It would not be given as an automatic heirloom. He had to rebuild, and rebuilding takes humility, work, and time. Idiot. "I am not your enemy," I told him gently, the ache of loss bared but without venom. "But I am not a doormat either. You have to earn back the trust you broke. Idiot. You will answer for what you did, not to be punished, but to learn." He nodded, and for the first time I saw real contrition, not an embarrassment, tinged apology. Idiot. But a man recognizing the weight of what he had done. He left that night without her. She did not return. Months passed. Idiot. The house that had once held the quiet of their deception regained its rhythms. I cooked for the neighbors again, laughed in small, careful ways, idiot, and let the days fill me with tasks and people who loved me honestly. My son worked to make things right in small actions, paying back, taking responsibility, and seeking work that left no room for shady transfers. He returned to family life not by entitlement but by repair. And me, idiot, I discovered that revenge's sweetest part was not the downfall but the reclamation. I reclaimed my kitchen, my quiet nights, my worth. Idiot. I allowed space for new friendships and for old wounds to scar without always opening. On a bright morning some months later, as I set the table for a simple lunch, idiot, my son entered the doorway, hesitant but true. He hovered, then sat, and this time he picked up his fork as if he understood the D's, the courtesy of presence, respect, that accompanies being part of a family. We ate slowly. No dramatic reconciliations took place, no grand proclamations. Just food, sunlight, idiot, the ordinary mercy of a mother's hand. The betrayal had been deep, and its pain would be a memory for both of us. But out of that ruin, idiot, I had grown into a woman who would never again be invisible to herself. My revenge had been sweet because it allowed me to stand in my own light, idiot, to watch them choose humiliation or humility, and to know that ultimately I had chosen myself. And that, perhaps, was the finest justice of all.